Good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha Garcia, your host for today. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Sprout HR and Finance Experts by Sprout Solutions. How are you today? I'm sure it is a critical time for HR, and so we are here to give you legal and practical advice to help you lead your company. By the way, we're live on Facebook. Just to give you a brief background of who we are, Sprout is an HR technology company that helps your company take it to the next level in terms of taking care of your people. We provide systems and support for recruitment, timekeeping and payroll, analytics, and it's all cloud-based system enabled to work from home for you. And now we hope to be able to help lift your team during this crisis. No. And also, we do have a raffle going on for this webinar. So what are our raffle mechanics? Okay. Okay, so for today's raffle mechanics, here's how you can join our raffle. Collect all 3 words or 3 keywords and get the chance to win a 500 peso Shopee gift certificate. So what are the mechanics for this one? Okay, number 1, collect all 3 keywords that will be finished or flashed on the screen throughout the seminar. Follow our official Facebook page at Sprout Solutions PH. Comment all 3 keywords on the post pinned on our page. Number 4, we'll also announce the lucky winner at the end of the session. 5, and then we'll be sending the gift certificates through email after the session before 6 p.m. So please participate on our raffle and hope you'll enjoy our Shopee gift certificate, okay? So also prepare your questions for the fireside chat session later and ask us anything on your mind with regards to the matters concerning our topic for today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today. She's our product manager for Sprout Insight, Miss Sok Orlina. Hi, Sok. Good day.
Hi, good morning. Hello, hi everyone. So, my topic for today is where HR data can make a difference. Where HR data makes a difference. So, as you know, with the data and analytical systems available today, HR can make or can have a bigger positive impact on critical business issues more than ever before. So, HR analytics can help organizations reap benefits across a number of domains, from hiring the right people to onboarding effectively, and of course, reducing attrition. Yet, even though HR departments are generating more data than ever, they often struggle to turn their data into valuable insights. So, something that I maybe realize when I'm talking to HR practitioners, whenever I do a product demo to them, is that HR has tended to be reactive. Like, even though HR relied on data, but it's always on just looking back. So, for example, like yes, we gather data on new hires, we gather data on employee turnover, but it's really more of like a quarterly summary na lang, or a monthly summary, or sometimes even an annual summary na lang. But you have to be more reactive to it, and we shouldn't be intimidated in handling data, especially and even big data. So that's my the gist of my talk today. So next slide, please. There. So I wanted to talk about really the benefits or the goals of data science and how it can relate to HR. So I listed down here 4 results of data science, of any data science experiment. So number 1 is new knowledge is created. Number 2, decisions or policies are made based on the outcome of your data science experiment. Number 3, report, presentation, or app with impact is created based on the new knowledge. And number 4 is somewhat not as positive as the 3 before, but also a good thing. And that is that we learned that the data that we got and we gathered cannot answer the question or the issue that we have on hand. So next slide, please. So yeah, how do we separate hype from value? So you've probably heard a lot about data science and big data, and there's a lot of hype around these areas. And I think also sort of inflated expectations on what data science and data can actually accomplish. But I think overall, if we just set our focus into or if we set our focus into asking the right questions, then we can separate hype and we can create actual business value and that will impact our overall organization health. So, next slide, please. And so this is my checklist of questions. Number one, what is the question you are trying to answer with data? Number two, do you have the data to actually answer that question? And number three, could you use the answer that you've collected? So examples of that would be number one, what question are you trying to answer with your data? Or what issues are you trying to solve maybe? Or what issues are you trying to maybe not even solve, but try to understand and try to understand maybe is it affecting your organization? Because maybe probably not, but you wouldn't know unless you would monitor it. So my example there is, I have a high employee turnover. Marami nagre-resign. So that's my number one question. Why is my employee turnover high? And with the number two, do you have the data to actually answer that question? So another thing to ask there is, do I keep track of my employees' reasons for leaving? Do I have that data intact? Like, have I been keeping records from exit interviews? And do I keep track kung ano yung mga common reasons of leaving ng mga employees natin? And then aside from that, aside from the files that we got from our exit interviews, we should also look into the employee profiles of these employees who left. Like, what is their job position? What is their job title in your company? How long did they stay with their company? Baka karamihan sa mga umaalis are just less than a year or maybe less than even 6 months, less than their regularization. So it might mean that the onboarding might not be as effective as you think. But also look into their salary. Like, is it at par with industry standards? Might be a reason for your employees' turnover. And in the part two, could you use part three question? Could you use the answer that you've collected? So knowing that you've gathered the exit interviews, you've gathered the reasons for leaving of your previous employees, you've collated their employee profiles, you've understand this was their salary before, this is their position, this is their tenure, this was how long they stayed in their company. And then maybe you could use that answers that you've collected into, say, creating a better retention plan. And then another use case that I want to like, go through with the flow in my questions checklist is what if my problem or my issue naman is why is my payroll expense super high? So what do I have the data to actually answer that question? So what do? I go back to my payroll records. I go back to the breakdown of all the payroll runs that I created during the past 5 months. So could it be that maybe I could check if I gave away a very high commissions for the past few months? Might mean that I have had a lot of new hires in the past few months. Or maybe not just new hires, but you also have to drill down if these new hires are what position or what kind of employee category are they. Like it might mean that pwede na onti lang yung new hires mo, but they're all senior executives. And so kaya up yung payroll expense natin. And then part 3, could you use the answer that you've collected? So given na you've hired, given that your issue at hand is that you have very high payroll expense, and you saw that using the data that you gathered in the employee profiles of your the new hires, is that they're mostly senior executives, then the answer that you've collected would be, it might mean that your payroll expense is high, but it's not really an issue. It's because you're trying to grow your business. You're trying to hire more senior executives. So next slide, please. So it's my checklist. So number one, the step one in separating hype from value is to identify the problem. Number two, to organize your records. You're supporting or related to the issue at hand. So, like I mentioned earlier, when you're looking into attrition, you don't just look into the profiles of those who resign, or you don't just look into the names of those who resign. You don't just look into the numbers na, okay, merong 20 na umalas last month. And you don't end there, but you have to drill through the supporting or related information that you have. So you'd have to ask also, sino ba yung mga supervisors ng mga umalas na employees? From which department do they belong to? Or what is their position? And maybe you'd have to create, or you can suggest more, let's say, a better team to handle what the former employee was doing. Maybe they would need more support, or maybe it might cost them their burnout before. So, and then my last checklist is make a decision based on the new information. So, not just so if your payroll expense was too high, might mean that you can create a decision na you'd want to maybe cut down cost in other aspects of your payroll expense. So given that if your business goal really is to hire more senior executives. So next slide, please. Yeah. So implementation and attrition. So I wanted to drill down on attrition specifically because I know that it's one of the most common and actually costliest problem in workforce. So implementation and attrition, number one, step one is determine whether attrition is a problem. How do you do that? Do that, of course, by attrition monitoring, by benchmarking, and by creating a needs assessment. So it's not always, I know it's not always easy to get benchmarking resource, especially locally. There's not really locally available for that. And maybe if there are, to be through surveys lang, or it would be a very expensive report. But these are things that, these are investments that I think can really maintain excellence within your organization. So if you know that this is your attrition rate, how would you know that you're doing well? Of course, by comparing it to other organizations' attrition rate within your industry. So if you're from a BPO and my attrition rate is say 3.2, 3.5, how would I know if I'm doing well with regards to that? How would I know? How would I be confident enough to encourage more clients to partner with me? So you can do that by comparing it to attrition records or attrition data or attrition rate of other organizations. So step two is to establish a plan of action. So after reviewing the turnover analysis, after reviewing the attrition rate of within your organization and comparing it using benchmarking data, create a plan to improve retention. So you can do that by identifying broad-based or targeted strategies or combination for implementation. So yeah, next step. And then you implement the retention plan. So you execute the strategies that have been identified appropriate for the specific problem. So for example, you found out that a common reason for leaving within your employees or among your employees was location, or that they're they're living far from your office site. So a strategy that you can execute there would be maybe suggesting a shuttle, just like how we did it in Sprout. So we had a shuttle back then before the quarantine. We had a shuttle to two major terminals, terminals. So there, so it would help with the commute of our employees. So the last step, of course, is you evaluate the results. So after implementing your strategy, evaluate your results to assess the impact relative to the cost. So so after a few months, you'd think you would go back to your attrition, I don't know, spreadsheet or dashboard if you have a dashboard. Then you'd check na if bumaba na ba yung attrition ko given that these are the strategies that I implemented internally. Okay. Um, next, next slide, please. So these are just some of the challenges that I think we can answer better if we have a better understanding of our HR data. So number one, how do I retain people better given this information, given my attrition information, given my employee records? Number two, was I able to maintain a target absenteeism for my department? Or is it at par with other departments' absenteeism rate? And number three, do I have a better understanding of how my team reports for work, especially since we are all reporting remotely? So those are, I think, some of just the things that we can answer better if we have a better grasp of our HR records, of our HR data. So really, just something to understand there is we really can't be reactive anymore. We can't just rely on the end of year reports or end of year business planning. We have to constantly know. We have to constantly know or monitor everything in our organization, and once we know that, we have to constantly implement strategies to make sure that we monitor or we maintain excellence within our organization. And it's not just a one-time, big-time thing. Like some of our clients, what they do is they get months-long data cleanup within their organization. And then once na nalatag na nila lahat, once na they prepare their spreadsheets, they prepare their dashboards, and they stop there. It's the nirvana. But it shouldn't be the nirvana. It's not a one-time, big-time thing. It's a constant, if not, maybe not daily, maybe daily is too much, but at least monthly monitoring of how your employees are doing, not just with regards to onboarding or hiring, but not just attendance really, but you also have to understand how these disparity with the HR metrics that you're trying to monitor and how that affect the overall cost to your business goals. There. So here. Next slide, please. Thank you.
right. Thank you, Sok, for that informative talk. I'd like to announce our second raffle keyword for today. So I hope you got the first one earlier. So the second keyword is innovation. Again, our raffle keyword number two is innovation. Okay, so that you'll get to know more about who we are here in Sprout, please watch the short video before we move on to the fireside chat portion of the event.
The Philippines is an amazing place because of the people here. I'm constantly blown away by the work ethic of young professionals in this country. And that's a really powerful thing. And that has driven an economy that's growing at a phenomenal rate. On top of that, we have all of these challenges, like inefficiencies in really big things and really small things, and those are all opportunities for these enterprising people to make a difference in the country. And these people are working by and large in small businesses that are struggling to get by. It's super powerful if we can help that huge group of companies, of people who are the ones responsible for pushing this country forward at the amazing rate that it is moving forward.
All right. So I hope you love that video. Siguro proceed na tayo sa the third raffle keyword. All right. So just take note, our third raffle keyword for today is digital. Again, our third raffle keyword is digital. Recap ko lang lahat ng keywords natin for today so that everyone would have a chance to win the 500 Shopee gift certificate. So, our three keywords for today, data, innovation, and digital. Again, it's data, innovation, and digital. Join the raffle by following our Sprout Solution page and commenting these three keywords on the pinned post. So, the next portion of this event is our fireside chat. Prepare your questions and just type them on the chat box as you can see on your screen. I'd like to welcome back our first speaker, Sok Orlina. And for our second panelist, I'd like to introduce our Sprouts Head of Finance. Let's welcome Sir Geoffrey Ogang. And our third panelist for today is Eduardo Gutierrez, Sprouts Director of Innovation. And finally, let's welcome Lester Nazarene Ople, Sprouts Legal Counsel and Public Sector Engagement Lead. Welcome, panelists and ladies and gentlemen. We are now opening the floor for questions. Please type them on the Zoom chat box below. Okay, so let's check for some questions in the Sprout chat box right here. Okay, we have one question from the audience. Number one, um, okay, so how do I start organizing my data? Do I really need an analytics tools to do that? Okay, who would want to answer this first question from our audience?
I would like to add an answer to that.
Mhm.
But my answer would really be pertaining to data privacy compliance. So if ever you would need to organize your data, please make sure that you comply with the requirements of the data privacy law with respect to maintaining the technical, physical, and organizational safety measures in safekeeping, storage, and processing of data. Again, if you were with us in the previous webinars, we reiterate that it is very important that whenever we handle particularly HR data, this concerns data on salaries, benefits, um, legal status, and other personal information and sensitive personal information, it's very important that these are kept in compliance with the Data Privacy Act, and the processing is in compliance with two things: the what the data subjects consented to in terms of processing, and second, of course, the legal requirements of the law.
Right, from a more I'll butt in. Hi guys. From a more practical and less legal perspective. There's my camera. All right. Sorry about the weird hobo beard that I'm rocking this ECQ. So from a
Don't worry,
more
Ed.
practical,
We all think Ed the beard suits you.
yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna start like screaming Wilson soon enough. Anyway, from a more practical standpoint, it doesn't, like, data doesn't as much need to be stored in a specific way or in a specific format. Like, it's more important to capture it and to be able to capture it in a way that it can be measured later, and also in a way that actually tackles exactly what it is. There's a big problem with a lot of people that are using data in not defining what they're trying to capture. And as Sok explained earlier, there's like naming conventions that you basically have to be very sure that you can that you know exactly how you're capturing the data that you're capturing. Because if that definition is a little wobbly, then it's going to be very hard for anybody really to make sense of it later. They're going to get to the wrong conclusions. They're not going to be able to measure it well enough, right? Is this survey question, to put it in like in an example, should it be a drop down and then I can do a pie chart? Should it be like an open-ended question that we have to look into and try to, figure out what kind of biases the person, the respondent, had? It's I think that's one of the bigger things. So there's not a single way to handle how do you store data, but you need to processize, or at least have a very clear method on how you do it.
All right. Thank you for those answers, panelists. So we have a second question here. What are organizations doing now for their HR or people analytics? What areas or metrics are they tracking? What should I be tracking?
Maybe I'll share from experience. No, so currently, there are a lot of ways on how people track HR data right now. No, so from the companies where I came from before, they are tracking it manually. It's very challenging, of course. And actually, one of the major KPIs that they are monitoring is attrition. So as Sok mentioned earlier, so attrition is really a big problem for some companies. Basically, because of shift of generations. And also we have to really assess how the company handles that, the retention plan, and also the reasons why people are leaving. So areas to watch out. Yeah, of course, attrition for me. Yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
to add that in more particular to this current ECQ, a lot of the Department of Labor issuances pertain to reporting of organizational data. So the names of employees, the ages, the position titles, the home addresses, the employment status, whether regular, probationary, or contractual. These reports required by the Department of Labor actually are inputs to availment of certain benefits, particularly the DOLE camp as well as the SBWS of the SSS. Now, if you had no other way of handling the data, unlike like if you are keeping it manually in paper files stored in filing cabinets that are fireproof, and then you have to manually pull it up, it would take you a really long time for you to be able to complete the data fields required in these DOLE reports. Compare that with you having a very one-click style of tool where you can simply export an Excel file that would contain the required data fields, napakadali ng buhay ng HR kapag may ganun tayong tool. So that's the reason why we really advocate data for especially in HR.
Yeah. And that's what Sprout Insight offers, right, Attorney?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, it's me promoting, Sprout
Yeah,
Insight.
shameless job.
Yeah. I
No,
think
but
I,
it's.
yeah.
Sorry, please. Sorry.
Something to add there. I think another important metric to monitor and something that can be easily forgotten is the cost of the, collating the cost of recruiting expenses, training and onboarding expenses, benefits expenses, aside from the salary expenses that we got, and then comparing that to our business performance. So we can understand more the ROI that we get from our workforce.
I actually would also argue that one big factor that maybe people don't talk about so much is that for many or for most companies actually, uh, getting the data is something that happens reactively, right? We have a problem here, and it's an obvious problem, right? We've just been hit in the face with something. And then you're like, okay, let's look into it. And you start gathering all the information, and you start looking at it, and that information is a little skewed because you're gathering it with that mindset in mind, like it's only about this problem. What kind of questions should we ask in order to find out what happened and why we're in this situation? Whereas, as opposed to, and I'm going to follow Geoff's lead and shamelessly plug, like things like Insight that our clients tell us, they show me the information about the questions that I haven't asked yet. So you can figure out if there's a problem ahead. It isn't yet a problem, but it's like, hey, this is leaning towards something. You can put measures in place before you come to that, right? Because we're already capturing the data for you. We're already asking ourselves these questions, right? What can we do for our clients to help them grow their business?
Yeah, and I think it's even though you maintain it on your own, of course you can do HR analytics on your own, but just like what Ed said, where do you start? I think that's the hardest part. Like, how would you know if you have a problem if you don't know what are you looking at really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this
And
quote from G.I. Joe, na, knowing is half the battle.
Wow, great philosopher, G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
One of the, foundations of our culture.
All right, wonderful insights there, panelists. So we actually have a related question after what Attorney Lester said earlier about data. So the question is, given that data changes from time to time, I am sure that decisions or findings from here are accurate.
I'd like to I'd like to begin the answer here, no, in terms of the rights of a data subject. When you go to the Data Privacy Act, one of the rights of the data subject is what we call the right to rectification, which means that, for example, I am an employee. I have my employer has my employment information. The data subject actually has the right to inspect and ensure that the information collected by the employer or any data controller, personal information controller for that matter, is accurate. And I have the right to demand that it be corrected or particular sections deleted because of inaccuracy. That does not mean to say that a data subject would have the absolute right to determine what the employer or the personal information controller can or may collect about the data subject. It only means that upon inspection, upon demand to inspect, and there is an error, the data subject has the right to demand the correction. Now, in terms of uh, ensuring that findings are accurate, no, it now goes to what decisions are you making based on the data. For example, Sok made a good point earlier about the costing of HR. If you are seeing that your HR costs are increasing, you may have uh, an erroneous conclusion in terms of the company is losing business or you have excess headcount, and this may lead you into an erroneous conclusion, or rather an erroneous decision to retrench personnel or modify your benefits that would cause detriment not only to your employees but also to your productivity and efficiency as a business. So one thing that I would like to impress upon the audience is that it is very important that we ensure that data is correct, because it drives data being correct for and in itself is not it's not a real end. What the data should be doing is it should be driving you to make decisions in a timely manner, in a decisive manner. And if your data is not doing that, then what's the point of collecting the data?
All right. Thank you, Attorney Lester, for that. So another question from our audience is that, as an HR admin, how does this benefit me?
I mean, I can take that if you guys want. As an HR admin, your value is not on seeing people out the door and like through the door into the company, right? Things like attrition, which is obviously a big part of especially BPO and operationally intensive companies, is a huge driver for not only the kind of workload that you have, but also for how well the company is going to perform, right? You don't hire somebody and once this person gets through the door, he's already performing at the same level of that person that left, that had been working there for 2 years, right? You're losing a lot of experience, you're losing a lot of value for the company. From your perspective as an HR practitioner, you can do so much more. It's more about the quality of the work that you're going to be putting in. If we can help you make the decisions that make more sense also as an HR practitioner, because you can look at the data with consistency and really be able to interpret things without bias. Basically, it's going to make you better as an HR practitioner in general, but also a better contributor to the health of the company, right? And so those two, like those three things, right? What kind of work are you doing? How well can you performing? And what do you have in your sort of toolbox in order to solve those problems? It's like it radically changes the way that you handle things.
All right.
I'd,
Thank you,
I'd like
Ed,
to,
that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to add something to what Ed mentioned. I like how Ed mentioned that data is a part that, data analytics is part of the HR toolkit. Of course, that goes to my earlier answer that you have to have a certain objective or end in mind when you collect, process, and store data as well as report it or process it through analytics. If your data is just, if it's just going to your Execom's mailbox and then it gets read on a Monday and then that's it, that's an unfortunate use of the data. So what really is important with the data is this should drive quality decisions, timely interventions, and you're able to make sense of the data. And it this is where tools like Sprout really come into play, because aside from it being a very convenient tool to use, you have access to experts like Ed, Sok, and if you are tuned into this webinar on a regular basis, you are also aware that we are offering the Rescue Kit. The Rescue Kit comes with access to in-house Sprout experts. So we have our BCP planning, and you have access to the legal materials that we are producing through this webinar. So we hope that we are able to share how Sprout, not only as an HR timekeeping tool, can make sense for you, but also it can also help you drive analytics and bring your HR into the next level in terms of using analytics-driven decisions.
All right. Thank you for that additional info, Attorney Lester. So we actually have some questions from our Facebook Live. One is, yes, it is easy to have a digital file rather than paper files, but is it also mandated to require of hard copy files on on-site auditing? So just to repeat that, the question was, is it also mandated to require a hard or a hard copy files of on-site auditing for on-site auditing?
I'd like to answer that from a legal perspective, in the sense that what is the objective when we keep files? It's to prove that we have rights, or that there are obligations owed to us. If you have electronic versions of documents pursuant to the rules on electronic evidence and the e-commerce law, a paper file is just as good as its digital equivalent. Now, it would matter if you have things that are in the nature of contracts, or uh, documents that are generated first on paper and then you digitize it eventually, because you have the question of, are these documents notarized? Are these questions duly executed by the parties? So if you are able to answer that, and you have a clearly defined and documented policy as to what sort of documents and uh, other auditable materials you have in your premises, then I would believe that you would still be able to prove whether to an internal or to an external auditor regarding your compliance with your processes.
So to add to that, yeah, actually, it would depend on what kind of audit you're undergoing. So there are times that auditors are uh, audits both hard copy and soft copy. So I'm coming from a financial perspective, for example. So a financial audit requires both hard copy and soft copy and scanned copies audit, simply because our regulator, the BIR, mandates us to retain documents for 10 years. So that's worth knowing. So maybe we should also explore with the auditors and the kind of audit that we're undergoing. What are the requirements? So yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for those answers. So another question here that we have from our audience is that how do these analytics assist the company in making financial decisions, if any? So how does it help Dow to make decisions financially for the company?
Yeah, financial decision. So I think I'll start now.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, so focusing on attrition, actually, there are a lot of costs involved with attrition alone. So as mentioned, as Sok mentioned earlier, so we have to know what the reason of attrition is. So maybe you're not paying your employees enough, or not at par with the industry benchmark, or maybe you are not sending your employees to trainings or seminars, or maybe in terms of allowances. So it's a financial decision of whether, for example, you increase the basic salary or just play around with the current salary package. But playing around means that maybe you can offer allowances or de minimis, maybe maximizing the de minimis, which is allowed by the BIR. So yeah, so those are the kinds of financial decisions that could aid the company. So and one major expenditure of a company is actually training people, right? So yeah, so that's a big financial decision for the company. And also losing an employee, it brings a lot of cost to the company, because when you bring someone in, you need to train him again. You need to give him benefits, give him benefits maybe your existing employees are not receiving. So yeah, this would entail a lot of financial decisions of whether you retain the employee, match the uh, industry salary range, or just lose the employee and explore another. So yeah, that's for me.
There's a lot more. I mean, probably Sok can share some of the information that we share in on Insight, but I know like how many companies know at a glance how much they're spending on overtime per department, right? Or how much
Correct.
are they, are employees that come in late and leave late actually costing the company in both terms, right? Um, Besides attrition, which definitely is a big driver for money, right, and expenses, and things like training. There's a lot of those things like tracking how much attrition and why the attrition is coming up.
Correct.
It's very difficult, but it's possible if you look at the right data. But also there's a lot of cost impacting factors that we already track, right? I mean, Sok is the insight expert here, so she would know what kind of features
Yeah.
we have.
Yeah. So um, I think there's so many uh, cost impacting ways in regards to HR. As what Joff mentioned, I think kahit anong galaw ng employee may cost na katumbas yun. There's a maybe it's not as tangible as you would think, or for example, when assigning cost of attrition, it's not just the loss of it's not, I don't know. It's really hard to create a formula for how much is your how much did you lose because of attrition. Can be accounted for because of since an employee left, you'd have to rehire again. So uh, um, you have to consider recruitment costs. You have to consider training costs, like what Jeff mentioned earlier. It's so expensive. And then you also have to consider cost on maybe because of this employee left. How did it impact the productivity of your current employees that are still there? Might also affect them maybe with their productivity, di ba? Maybe bumaba yung moral dahil may mga umalis dahil because of um, these employees who left, especially those employees who left na matagal na yung tenure with your company. So those are intangible costs related to that, and it's really different. The computation for that for any organization. I mean, maybe this organization is not considering training costs. Maybe this organization is not considering hiring costs kasi mura lang mag-recruit. Maybe for other positions it's cheap to recruit, but um, all these things that you have to track, and you always have to realize, or you always have to put in your head that anything really has a cost to it, especially with HR.
Yeah. In addition to that, I would like to add more, no, because of the current pandemic. So most of the employees right now wants their wants all of their dependents to be covered by a health card as much as possible, right? And in my previous experience in my previous companies, some employees leave simply because the other company is offering a coverage of two dependents, for example, or three dependents or four dependents. So we don't want to lose an employee by that issue alone, right? For example, if we can cover dependents of the employee and then just let them pay it in installment. So it's just a matter of a temporary cash outflow issue for the company, but you retain your employee. So yeah, so that's I think that's also one of the major things right now to focus on, the health coverage of employees.
All right. Thank you everyone for that answer, no? So we do have one last question from the audience right now. Besides knowing the trends about my company, how can data help me save financially? So knowing the trends, paano pa rin daw the company or help them company save financially?
Yeah, so in connection to what I have mentioned earlier, so for example, when you're comparing salary to, versus the industry, so it's a matter of decision making where whether you increase the basic salary or just play around with the current salary package by giving, for example, allowances or giving employees the minimum allowances which is allowed by the BIR. So yeah, so this is a way for a company as well to save on cost. Save on cost meaning not reducing the cost, but retaining its cost on its current level, and being at par with the industry as well. No, so by offering allowances or maximizing the minimis approved by the government, you're increasing actually the net pay of people. So this is way better than increasing the basic salary of people. So yeah, so that's my insight.
Yeah, with regards to really finances within your organization, you shouldn't really just look into payroll. There are so
Yeah.
many different things to consider. Um, like I mentioned earlier, everything has a cost impact. If an employee is lagging late, or an employee has been having a high absenteeism rate, that has a cost impact to your productivity and to your company's business strategy then. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, and
I'd like
also get yeah. Go ahead, attorney.
I'd like to add one thing. The good thing about these kind of data decisions is that let's not think about it solely as matters on saving cost, but spending money well. One thing that can be very important, especially in the post ECQ world, one of the requirements, actually, it's not a requirement, but the DTI, the DOLE, and the various government agencies are still debating this, but for the business side, we for the business world, we all have to comply, is the provisioning of shuttles. Now, if you do not have data to show that where your employees are located, and you can use the data in plotting the most efficient routes for your company shuttles. You can use this kind of data to plot the most cost efficient way of delivering the desktops or the laptops to employees during a BCP scenario. These are not technically spend saving money, but they are spending the money well. No, so let's not think of it solely as we want to save the company a few thousand pesos. It's not as simple as that sometimes. Sometimes because it matters where we spend it. If we spend it judiciously
Yeah.
rather judicially, legal hangover. Sorry. If we spend it judiciously, it makes a lot of business sense, and you may not see it in the way of increased profit or decreased cost, but it's really the intangible sometimes that you have to manage.
Yeah.
So
And also, yeah, dovetailing to what Ed mentioned earlier about overtime. So maybe if you're, for example, if your department is spending so much overtime, so maybe it's about time for you to do a time and motion study. For example, for my team, I actually don't allow them to render overtime when what they're about to do during the overtime is what they should have done during the normal office hours. So I'm just allowing them to do overtime when we have reconciliations or backlogs. We are working on it, but for the normal daily activities, I don't allow them to do overtime. So maybe it's about time for you to do time and motion study to know what your people are doing within the 8 working hours. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a lot of data to be collected from a lot of sources. Collecting it well is super important. We've already established that. But there are things that are costing your company money, and that includes how you're spending your time, right? I always try to measure those things in terms of opportunity cost, right? For example, if an HR practitioner is spending 8 hours a day doing computing and filing their government contributions, well, under not 8 hours a day, 8 hours let's say a month, for example, right? Those are 16 hours lost, right? It's the 8 that you spent doing that and the 8 hours that you could have used in doing something more productive, right?
Yeah.
You have to quantify things in ways that really make sense, because if we can remove some of that work from your day-to-day and you can spend it doing something that makes more sense, or it's like harder, or maybe you're especially good at, then you're really pushing forward like twice as fast as you thought. And there's a lot of examples of that, and there's a lot of ways to look at the data and come up with solutions, right? I always like this story from, I think it was UPS in the United States. They, this is a weird example, but for UPS, it's how quickly they can deliver and how many deliveries they can do per day that actually makes them money, right? And at some point, they have these big trucks that go around towns doing everything. And at some point, somebody thought, hey, you can turn right on red, right? And how many time are the trucks spending on stoplights? And somebody said, what if we make a GPS that always turns right? It doesn't let you turn left. So they never stop and they calculate the routes for deliveries, and they spend the entire day just making returns. like they would make it right turns, not red turns, make it right turns. And they tried it out and they saved a ton of money. They could do way more deliveries than they thought just by implementing that little change, right? So in your company, probably you can't, unless you're UPS or a delivery company, maybe you can't do that. But there are other things that you can think of, and you can go like say, hey, maybe a policy change this way will affect everything, because I have a lot of data suggesting that there's a lot of wastage here, or there's a lot of inefficiencies here. But you need to know that they are inefficiencies, right, before they become a problem, like, or even before you pay attention to them. Like, there's so many opportunities out there for businesses to be done a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a really cool example.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, panelists, for those informative inputs. No, so I think it's our time. Our time is up right now for the panel session. Thank you, Sok, Ed, Attorney Lester, and Jov, for everything that you've given us today. So,
Thank you for the.
I-
Thank you.
Thanks.
all right.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the remaining time right now, I would do a rescue kit plug, as mentioned ni Attorney Lester, or I think it was Joff. We do have a rescue kit up and running right now. I'd also like to announce that you can still get all the HR help that you need, because we extended the sign up of the Sprout Rescue Kit until May 31st. So get free 60-day access to our HR and payroll system, Instacash, and BCP expert advice. Sign up now on the link that you can see on the screen, or contact me for details. Okay. So now, for the moment that everyone is looking for or waiting for, I'd like to announce the 4 raffle winners. So sino ba sila? Okay. All right. Who's our 4 winners? Okay, so for our raffle winners for today is Tobias Johansson, Danilin Rioveros, Carla Ebro, Angelica San Jose. Okay, to repeat our winners, it's Tobias Johansson, Danilin Rioveros, Carla Ebro, and Angelica San Jose. Okay, all right. So if you want your e-certifications for attending today's session, you may get them by email request to info@sprout.ph. Kindly indicate your full name, company, and position. And also, follow us on our social media pages and use the hashtag OBWithSprout to be updated on our events. And hopefully we'll see you next week, Tuesday, on our next seminar. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. All right. Everybody, thank you again for participating for today's webinar, and I hope everyone has a great day.